Today's episode is brought to you by Powbox, the easiest way to make your practice email HIPAA compliant. It works with the Gmail or Outlook account you already use, and your clients never have to log into a portal to read your messages. Get $250 off an annual plan with promo code MODERN.
When the session ends, the admin begins. From progress notes to insurance claims, managing a practice takes time. Simple Practice is the all-in-one EHR built specifically for therapists to streamline your workflow and give you your hours back.
Start with a 7-day free trial, then get 50% off your first 3 months. Just go to simplepractice.com. The Conversion Therapy Survivor Network, or CTSN, is a survivor-led nonprofit supporting people harmed by conversion therapy. CTSN provides survivor support groups, education, and resources for affirming mental health professionals. Learn more or support the mission at conversionsurvivor.org.
You're listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide, where therapists live, breathe, and practice as human beings. To support you as a whole person and a therapist, here are your hosts, Curt Widhalm and Katie Vernoy.
Welcome back, Modern Therapists. This is Modern Therapist Survival Guide. I'm Curt Widhalm with Katie Vernoy, and this is the podcast for therapists about the things that go on in our profession, the things that go on with the clients that we serve. And we're in the midst of Pride Month. Katie and I are talking about some of the work that we do as therapists, some of the wonderful guests that we have on this month to help illustrate things. And we're talking again about being in this ally space. That part of the discussion that we have in the background of this episode is, when do we bring on experts and lived experiences for the conversations that we're having as part of this month, and recognizing why Pride Month is so important for all of our wonderful friends in the LGBTQ plus community? And when did Katie and I lean into our ally work, the work that we do? We've had our Awkward Ally episode last week. It was amazing. If you haven't listened to it, check it out.
We hope it was good enough.
And Katie and I were deciding as we're talking in this episode about for being a stopgap therapist, being the therapist that you can't refer a client out to a specialist for whatever reasons. We'll get into that in a little bit. But when you're the good enough therapist, the safe enough therapist for somebody who's coming to you from the LGBTQ plus community, it might not be your specialty. It might not be a place that you are well versed in. And we were discussing whether or not this is an episode, or some of the other topics that we had considered for this month of, is this an episode that we bring in somebody who's an expert in the field? And we kind of settled on, if we're not having this conversation, holding ourselves and our field accountable, what the hell are we doing as allies if we're not also holding people accountable? We want to prop up LGBTQ plus voices. We hope that we are doing that not just in this month, but throughout the year. But we also know that they get tired of propping us all up all of the time and needing to be the ones who are the only ones pushing forward these messages. So we are here to say, you should be good enough. You should be safe enough. And if you're not, we've got some ideas for you.
We've heard a lot. Don't practice outside your competence. You must refer. There is harm you're doing if you aren't capable. And I believe there is some harm should someone not be safe enough. And there's this element of mental health deserts, insurance panels that don't have a lot of providers, where there is a client in front of you who needs care and you're what's available. And so, to me, in some ways, we're doing that here. We've taken trainings, we've done some of this work, so I think we feel competent to hold care, and both of us have clients, LGBTQ plus clients. And potentially, we're going to get feedback that we need someone to come in and do a deeper dive who does have this expertise. So please feel free to reach out to us. But we're going to hold down the fort for this episode. We're gonna do the work that we're saying that folks should do in everyday life. And so starting with why would you not refer out if you aren't the best therapist? I think that's a really good place to start because when we go into Facebook groups, there are, and I see this less lately, but there are folks who will say, well, you must refer out because you have a question about this or you feel uncomfortable with this. And while we're going to talk about when you absolutely have to refer, I think one of the things you said previous to hitting record, Curt, is if we refer out because we're not willing to do the work, is this an ethical issue? If we're not willing to do the consultation, we're not willing to do what we need to do to be safe and good enough for our clients. And so maybe we start with why we wouldn't refer out and then move into what we do when we aren't able to refer out or it's not potentially necessary to refer out.
I almost feel like there needs to be just a dedicated segment of our episodes where it's just called Curt Rants. And this might be the first time that we're specifically calling this out, but I am so tired of this scope of competence being used as a polite way for therapists to avoid their own discomfort. We have
Yeah.
people in this field who claim that they're experts in working with complex trauma after doing a weekend webinar. But the second that a non-binary client walks in, they suddenly get all moral and ethical, and they have this epiphany that they aren't qualified and that they need to refer out. So I'm saying this right now. This is not an ethical referral. You're just avoiding the labor of being a human being with literally a Google account and the ability to have the access of the world's knowledge, where you can do the basic amount of work to be able to pick up on how do I talk to somebody who has pronouns that don't fit into a binary feature. So getting maybe off of my soapbox here a little bit, we're saying that you don't have to have a PhD in queer theory to sit with somebody who's a human being, but there might be work that you have to do. Now, some of the reasons that I've seen that people can't refer out is, as you've mentioned, there are mental health deserts. You might be the only therapist in a particular area. You might be the only in-person therapist in a particular area. You can't necessarily refer to somebody even virtually these days. I see this as another kind of cop out is, well, I can refer them to somebody else in a part of the state. But if it's a trans teen whose parents are very anti this kind of identity, then this is not a safe referral out, because if there's no safety at home to be able to talk to somebody virtually, you're the stopgap in this situation. And, this might also apply to insurance panels that you're somebody who's in network and the specialists are not. So, or the wait lists are too long. These are all reasons that you might not be the one who gets to just pass along this client to somebody else. And that's part of where this is an episode to really be able to say, you can do it. I believe in you.
You can do it with caveats.
Yes.
You can do it with support. You can do it with good consultation, with a lot of potentially your own work related to bias, those types of things. I think I would shift the you can do it with you should figure out how to do it.
And a lot of the stuff is stuff that you're already doing. There suddenly becomes this pressure to have all kinds of knowledge about every single, queer developmental milestone. And I think that there's ways that you're still doing the job of a therapist by holding the frame of a therapy room. You're still responding to anxiety. You're still responding to depression. You're still managing crises as they come up. And really, the messy work in this is that you can still have clinical confidence, the ability to do those things that you do with every single client while remaining humble and having some humility around identities. And this really does come from what I mentioned at the top of the episode as far as be good enough, be safe enough. We're not talking about having your client teach you every single thing along the way. This is still where some of your between session work ends up coming in. But just because this is somebody coming from a population that you might not have as much experience with, part of how you get experience is you're open with your client about, hey, I'm learning along the way. I'm taking a course. I'm doing some consultation stuff. What you're talking about is brand new to me. I can be respectful and I can be listening and I can help support you through this. And I'm going to bring these questions back to consultation.
There are so many resources that are available that provide information. I'm thinking even just about what we have to offer, our backlog of episodes that has so much information, rich information with folks who are specialists, who have lived experience. And so I think it's something where if you aren't figuring out what your client is talking about, you're not looking that hard.
Yeah.
And so I'll link to all of our LGBTQ plus episodes in our show notes over at mtsgpodcast.com, depending on your relationship with Google or Chat or Claude or whoever, whatever AI/search engine you have. You can even in your own time get a self-produced course. But better than that, there's a lot of trainings that usually there's self-paced courses that you can purchase. There's a lot that you can do to learn about many of these topics. And so I think the question then becomes what requires specialization, meaning I know enough and I don't have to have years worth of training before I can step into it, and what requires some of this additional outside of session consultation or training. And I think part of this framing is LGBTQ plus clients aren't necessarily always talking about their identity as the clinical work. So any of that, it's learn how to be a decent human in the room with someone who has a different identity than you and do good therapy. So that's that one. There is some specializations, WPATH informed training for gender affirming care letters. There's some specifics around transition or some different types of clinical issues that may be deeper or a higher level of acuity or crisis than you can hold with consultation. But so much of what we're talking about in therapy with folks who have different identities than us oftentimes are along broad themes that we are going to work with every client. And so it becomes about being affirming, humble, connecting, and being in that space where a client does not feel like their identity is being judged or misunderstood to the best of our abilities. We're all humans, we're all different. And so that I think that is the piece, is determining what actually requires specialist care. It is pretty small what fits into that requirement. I think what's huge is being able to be affirming and welcoming in a safe space. And so that is the work that I think all therapists should do. And that is something, if you've got a client who's different from you, especially for this episode in the LGBTQ plus population, that you need to make sure you're doing that work and identifying where that bias, where that discomfort shows up, because if that becomes too big, yes, you are harmful to the client.
Quick question for therapists listening. Do you use Gmail or Outlook for client communication? Here's something most therapists don't realize. Even with a business or workspace account, Gmail and Outlook aren't fully HIPAA compliant. That gap is on you to fix. That's where Powbox comes in. Powbox automatically encrypts every email you send, and your clients read it right at their inbox. No portals, no passwords, no extra steps. It works with the Google Workspace or Microsoft 365 account you already have, so nothing about your day-to-day changes.
Setup takes minutes, there's no training required, and Powbox's US-based support team is there if you need them. Listeners of Modern Therapist Survival Guide get $250 off an annual plan. Visit powbox.com, that's PAUBOX, and use promo code MODERN.
In our back catalog of episodes, one that I also want to include in our show notes is an episode that we did on Are You Sure That You're a Specialist? Now, we had recorded that episode in the past about using specialist as a marketing term and how specialist promises better treatment than the average therapist. Now, this episode is actually the inverse of that episode. And I can't believe that we've never really stumbled into this before. But you don't have to be a specialist. Like,
No.
this is really the permission to be able to say, you know what? You can actually be a good average therapist than somebody who is a specialist. And this is really more of how to be able to navigate this in a way that is good enough. Shout out Don Winnicott. Smart guy. Did some good things for our field. And
Be the good enough therapist.
be the good enough therapist. Because part of where the decision making in some of these referrals really comes is from this feeling of lack of competence. And there are ways to get more competence, as Katie just described. So there are plenty of places to be able to get some of this information. But since we're talking about ethics, Katie and I both serve on our professional association's ethics board. Ethics are rarely black and white. There are situations where you can make a claim for yourself that this is a lack of competence situation, but we also have, if you refer out, that can be referral as abandonment.
Yeah.
And especially if who you're referring people to are not providing a warm space. I mean, you and I have run into specialists, and I'm saying that as people who are legitimately at the top of their field in a number of different areas, both within our profession, within the medical profession, within the legal profession, and those people are assholes. And and not
I
everybody,
think not all
but
not all
but
experts are assholes.
but there are some that are out there, and if what is really working in therapy with you is good enough, is the therapeutic relationship is actually what is helping a client because they see that you are somebody who is safe enough. This is really where you can kind of embrace that and be open with your clients. As I've said before, that I might be the one that you see along the way to be able to get to the end of somebody's wait list where you're able to pick up on more of the specialty kinds of things. I've worked with kids in the past who have, for a couple of years, been really anxious about how safe their parents are going to be when they identify, to me much earlier, gender dysphoria, and helping navigate even to be able to get to those conversations that then help to facilitate and say, you know what, my part of your journey is done. I'm handing you over to somebody who can help you to be able to fulfill the next steps. And this is really something where you may not be the end part of the destination of a client's life, but if they're coming to you, continue to do this work because you might be the one who stewards them along the way for a part of that journey.
I like the element that you're talking about here, which is meeting the client where they are with what you have and holding them in a safe space until, and I guess if they need more specialist care. I've had clients in the past where I was able to help with the identity work. We had done some different pieces around whether it's trauma or career stuff that, my area of specialty. And when some of the things that were coming up were related to their queer identity, that their shifting identity, and we came across pieces that were not covered within our therapy. And what I found really interesting was it wasn't about even competence, it was about lived experience and being able to work with someone who shared identities. And that was my job, was holding those clients in space with me, in a healing therapeutic space with me until a clinician that shared lived experience came available, and even having some crossover there. I think there's ways to do good enough work, safe enough work, but I think the way that you described it, Kurt's really interesting. Being part of their journey without feeling like you're doing harm or feeling like you're doing not enough. It's an interesting dynamic. I'm thinking of longer standing clients whose identities have become more understood and relevant as time went on. So when a client walks into your office, you may have a different response. But for longer standing clients, I think there's a lot that we consider, and I think folks who are in that space may be more likely to try to do some of what we're talking about here. And so I wanna shift to the clients who come into your office. You're the only person available, and it's a newer client, because I think that requires some different assessment as well.
And I think that this is where somewhere in the background, the steps for you to maybe put into place today is start by just kind of having a just in time kit available for yourself. If this is not an area where you are necessarily generally practicing, your just in time kit can include who's one or two or three LGBTQ plus colleagues that I can have on my speed dial. So that way, if a client comes in, I know who I can reach out to for consultation when and if this ever comes up. So that way, it's something where, I've mentioned in other episodes before, you might have the best practice that's marketed down to your niche in whatever issues that might be. And you're still going to end up with clients who come in who have identities or lived experiences that fall outside of that or in addition to whatever it is.
Yeah.
And these are the times where you can do yourself a favor by being able to have some of these things readily available for you. Or even just kind of practicing, here's my list of go to phrases in different ways to be able to say to a client, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll find out by next Wednesday when you come back. But I think that there are things that you can do where, I mean, number one, if you're still listening at this point in the episode, congratulations, you're already doing part of this work. But this is, some of the DIY steps to be able to serve as a stopgap. This is, have the emergency kit in the trunk of your car. Hopefully you never get a flat tire, you spin off to the side of the road and need to wait for hours. But it's nice to be able to put 5 minutes of effort into this to be able to kind of be prepared to triage your practice in a safe way.
Let's talk about why Kurt and I both use Simple Practice. Simple Practice is an all-in-one EHR that is HIPAA compliant, high trust certified, and built specifically for therapists.
For me, it's the integrated client communication. Messages from clients land straight in the chart, so I'm not copying things over from 3 different apps or emails or trying to remember who said what where.
For me, one of the things that saved me gigantic headaches is insurance billing. It was simple back when I was in network, and it stayed just as simple now that I'm out of network doing courtesy billing for my clients. That used to be the thing I dreaded most, and now it just runs. And if you're just starting out or growing your practice, they also have a credentialing service that helps you get paneled independently.
It takes the total headache out of insurance enrollment, giving you full autonomy over your own contracts without any middleman platforms taking a cut.
If you're ready to simplify the business side of your practice, now's the perfect time to try Simple Practice.
Start with a 7-day free trial, then get 50% off your first 3 months. Just go to simplepractice.com to claim the offer. Again, that's simplepractice.com.
As you're talking, there are some things that are rolling around in my brain that I'll try to put into coherent thoughts here. My belief is that therapist practices should be universally welcoming to all identities. That being said, I recognize that that's a pretty pie in the sky expectation because humans don't fit into that mold. We break ourselves down into subgroups. We oftentimes have mistrust of others. And so, as you're talking about this emergency kit, part of me feels sad, maybe that's the right word, or disappointed that there would need to be an emergency kit versus folks having a good enough framework to support these clients. Being able to be welcoming to identities, even at a superficial level, maybe not with the depth of knowledge that a specialist or someone with lived experience might have, but enough to be a warm, safe landing place. So, my hope is that folks would actually have intake paperwork that was open to learning about all different types of identities, being able to understand where identity fits in and where it doesn't, some basic cultural humility and practices. And I come back to our quote unquote California privilege. I recognize that there are different conversations happening here than in some of the other states in the United States, and obviously in other countries there's very different cultural expectations. So for me, when you talk about the emergency kit, if you have an emergency kit, great. Who can I consult with? Who can what resources can I reach out to if I happen to have a client call me and I'm the only one available. But if you're struggling to get a sufficiently affirming practice, it may make sense that you refer out even when it shouldn't actually happen, because I think harm to folks in marginalized identities is a risk. And if someone doesn't have the basics in place, even if they're the only therapist available, I do believe that could be harmful. Now, we could have a whole other conversation about is that a good enough therapist for the profession? And I don't want to go there. That's a whole rabbit hole. But and you're right. If people are listening at this point, they probably aren't the folks that don't have any way to be culturally competent or affirming. They're already trying to do some of the work. So thank you for sticking with us on this.
I want to talk about the invisible labor that goes into what we're talking about here, because in a standard case, one that your years of experience, and if you're early in your career, your months or even maybe minutes of experience of working with clients,
Mhm.
but your prep time is minimal when it's standard cases or it's cases that you've already put a lot of the work into. For being a stopgap therapist, your prep time doubles, triples. And that is a surcharge. Your time might be spending 2 to 3 hours outside of the session researching some of the stuff that we're talking about. So looking up gender affirming care as therapists, watching webinars, talking with consultants, that there are very natural feelings that come up for therapists. I hear this sometimes as far as who pays for those costs. If I'm spending 2 to 3 hours more, my hourly rate just dropped 60%. This is where allies can feel a lot of burnout, is if you're eating that cost because you're now needing to do unpaid labor to stay competent. These are feelings that come up, and it is something that you're going to need to figure out how you best want to handle that from a business end of thing. If you're paying for a consultant, that might be another $100 to $300 for an hour out of their time. And that might wipe out your entire profit for a client for a month, depending on what you're doing. this is something where I don't necessarily have a absolute recommendation on this. I want you to think about this as far as the ethics of your DIY allyship. If you're not willing, unable to pay the consultation tax to a supervisor, a consultant, are you actually doing ally work? Or are you just kind of coasting along and you're just a cheaper than the expert alternative who's doing no harm? And this also gets confusing with insurance panels because you aren't necessarily going to get paid more by the insurance panel to do some of these kinds of work. I don't work in insurance. I don't bill insurance. I'm pretty sure there's not CPT codes that are just, hey, go and pay
No.
consultants for things. So this is really dealing with a learning curve. Is it okay to bill a client to research their identity? The answer to that one is no. Uh,
It's absolutely no.
but this is a little bit of, guilt that allies feel. I feel bad charging somebody an extra fee because I have to pay for a consultant. But it's also something that you're going to wrestle with as far as how much unpaid labor can I give to be able to be just a little bit better than I was last week. The Conversion Therapy Survivor Network, or CTSN, is a survivor-led nonprofit supporting people who've been harmed by conversion therapy and other forms of conversion practices. Many survivors were told that their LGBTQ plus identity is something broken, sinful, or wrong they needed to suppress in order to be loved, accepted, or even physically safe. And for many CT survivors, those messages continue long after the therapy itself ends. Conversion Therapy Survivor Network exists to remind survivors that they are not alone.
They host weekly survivor support groups, share survivor stories publicly to raise awareness, and work to educate therapists and mental health professionals about the lasting impact conversion therapy can have. If you're a therapist listening to this podcast, your affirming care could genuinely change or even save someone's life. You can learn more, support the mission, or access resources at conversionsurvivor.org. In thinking about that, I have two different thoughts. One is the privilege it might require to be able to be a sufficient ally, whether it's doing this work that you're talking about or taking time to be an advocate or correctly not charging clients from different identities surcharges to learn about them. And I think that the solution I see is really designing your continuing education that is already required for a lot of us to support clients who are different from you. I find at conferences I've been to that the quote unquote cultural competence, DEI, however they're framed,
Cultural humility, whatever
cultural
else.
humility, those types of trainings are often the least attended of the different trainings that are available. That's not okay. There is so much we don't know about each other. There's such diversity in who we are as humans. And to not take opportunities to learn from experts with lived experience at a conference you're already at, I think is a missed opportunity. It's a way to take time you're already devoting and resources you're already devoting to that effort. We all have a huge amount of CEs that we have to take every couple of years. Devote some of that to being a good enough ally.
And if you've already completed your CEs, get some more.
That's true.
It's a minimum, it's not a maximum, and you can
Very
always
true.
continue to grow. And I will say this as especially if you're somebody who's putting social justice in your marketing. Yeah, actually look at your profit and loss statement if you're running your practice. If you aren't spending money on consultation from communities that you claim to serve, your allyship is just a line item that you're trying to get for free. That
Yeah.
you're basically asking marginalized communities to subsidize your clinical training if you're adding the surcharge onto them
Yeah.
just for the privilege of working with them. So, maybe I am settling it. Pay the tax. Do that yourself. Hire the consultant. Take the affirming tag off of your profile.
Yeah.
Unless you're willing to put the work in, because what we're trying to say in this episode, or at least some of the points, and Katie usually adds a lot that I forget to say when we're summarizing things, is don't be terrible. You might be fine just where you're at. Continue to work on being better. You don't have to be the expert in doing things, but do the things that move you slightly more towards being an expert to be able to help the client that you're working with. And it's potentially going to pay off and help the next one who shows up. Or it might be an investment into making yourself have new areas of your practice that serve. That's a actual good ROI if you're only looking at this from an investment in a business thing. Also, don't do that. That just makes you greedy, but do it because you want to and because it's good. But in the meantime, be good enough.
So before we close up, I want to talk about the no-goes, when to refer anyway, what you should not do, and what you need to pay attention to. So refer anyway if it's completely outside of your scope, if the presenting issues require such specialist knowledge or lived experience that you cannot be safe enough or good enough. The other reasons to refer oftentimes sit in who you are and how you're showing up. If your identities are not aligned with the person in front of you and you're consistently showing your own discomfort, you're constantly making mistakes, or you're overcorrecting if you're feeling very confused. If you get into this trap where you're so focused on being a good ally that you're not doing good therapy, I think that can be very
Yeah.
problematic. Or if your religious, family, or political background is showing up in the room and you're not able to address it, or you're not choosing to address it. There are ways that we can harm when we're trying to hold down the fort. And so I don't want to dismiss that. And I think there are ways around it. But if you aren't doing the work, you need to refer out. If you're not comfortable enough to be safe enough, you may need to refer out. I suggest doing the work first. I suggest digging in. But for all the reasons we said, that may be challenging. And so please do an assessment before you decide I'm good enough here.
You can find our show notes over at mtsgpodcast.com. We'll include links to a bunch of our back episodes over there. Follow us on our social media. Let us know what else needs to be added to this conversation. We'll gladly promote any of that kind of stuff, whether it be here or Facebook group, the Modern Therapist group. Continue the conversation on there. And until next time, I'm Curt Widhalm with Katie Vernoy.
Thanks again to Powbox for sponsoring today's episode.
Powbox helps therapists send and receive email that's secure, HIPAA compliant, and easy for clients to open. Get $250 off at powbox.com with promo code MODERN.
If running your practice feels like too many moving parts, Simple Practice pulls scheduling, billing, and client communication into one place.
Start with a 7-day free trial, then get 50% off your first 3 months at simplepractice.com. The Conversion Therapy Survivor Network is working to support survivors everywhere and bring an end to conversion therapy. To learn more, donate, or access educational resources, visit conversionsurvivor.org. That's conversionsurvivor.org.
Thank you for listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide. Learn more about who we are and what we do at mtsgpodcast.com. You can also join us on Facebook and Twitter. And please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our episodes.